book of Ruth, chapter 13, verse 6. And why are we reading the book of Ruth on Shavuot? So that's why we're studying it. Well, one reason is because Ruth was the great 1346. Ruth was the great-grandmother of Holokobi, Ruth was the great-grandmother of King David, and King David was born and died on Shavuot. So therefore, that's one reason why we read about Ruth on Shavuot. A second reason why we read about Ruth on Shavuot is because Ruth converted to the Jewish people, and on Shavuot, we all converted. We all came under the canopy of Hashem. And so those are the two most often cited reasons why we read it. There's other theories involved. In fact, I saw another reason actually yesterday. So let me very briefly share with you the third reason that I saw. This comes from Rabbi Schachter's explanation of Pirkei Avot. He said this. Said the following. Rabbi Schachter said, Rabbi Schachter said the following. He said the following. He said, here we go. It says, if I am not for myself, who am I for? And when I am for myself, what am I? Okay? So that's what it says in Pirkei Avot. If I am only for myself, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? Legit, right? That's a beautiful statement. So he says, there's an ancient custom to read the book of Ruth on Shavuos. It's usually assumed that the connection between the two is because they share the elements of conversion. That when we stood at Sinai, we nationally converted. And this book describes the conversion of Ruth. But Rabbi Schachter writes, there's an additional connection. There's a midrash that teaches that Ruth does not include laws relating to Tumah and Tahara. I mean, it doesn't say what's pure and what's impure, like, is this animal kosher to eat or not kosher? It doesn't say laws of, generally speaking, who can enter into the temple and who can't. It was written entirely to teach us that the great reward for those, it was written entirely to teach us the great reward reserved for those who bestow acts of kindness upon others. The whole reason why the book of Ruth was written was to teach us the reward for those who are kind to others. Because Ruth was so kind to her impoverished and widowed mother-in-law, Naomi, therefore Ruth was rewarded by having King David and his descendants, and the future Messiah will be a descendant of Ruth. So therefore, bestowing acts of kindness is why Ruth has another name. It's called the Megillah of Kindness, and also the Megillah of Conversion. And so this idea of converting is that you're accepting upon yourself to be kind. I'm not saying that people who are not Jewish are kind. That's the last thing I mean to say, but I'm saying that to be Jewish, you have to be kind. To convert to Jewish, you have to accept upon yourself to be kind. That's what the book of Ruth is about. It's about kindness. Ultimately, it comes down to kindness. And so that's another reason why we read this. If we want to be Jewish, we have to emulate Ruth's activities and be kind. So that's, I just want to say one thing, Thera, on that. I wanted to say that this is the yahrzeit of Tom tonight. And the whole week, we're studying in his memory. And Tom was a person who was exceedingly kind. Anybody who was ever his patient knew that he was not somebody who punched the clock. He would show up at your house at midnight if you needed him. And this was what was called kindness. So that's when I thought I read that and I thought of Tom. So I wanted to say that in this context. Yeah. And Thera, yes, I cut you off there. So yes, you're absolutely right that Boaz also exemplified kindness, and that's very powerful. The whole book is filled with people who are kind. Shepsel reminded me that when I first met him 20 years ago, I gave a shiur called Naomi Monster-in-Law. But that's for a different time. That was a different time in my life. Yes, and our dear friend Jerry Schechtman is going to share something. Yes, Jerry.
Yes, the descendants of David are going to represent the Messianic times. Is there currently a living family that traced themselves all the way back to Naomi?
You mean not to Naomi, to David? To Naomi and David, yeah. So there are a few families, the Lubavitchers say, but I think that I trace back to him because I'm a descendant of Elimelech. And Rabbi Elimelech was a descendant of King David. And in fact, Rabbi Elimelech, his name comes from the beginning of this book. So we're all descendants of David. And really, I think it doesn't mean a literal descendant. I think it means a spiritual descendant. And if somebody has all the other qualifications, he's just not a literal descendant of David, I think we'll deal with that problem. That means we'll be at the very end of solving all the other problems in the world.
Right, the Rambam says it has to be like a genetic descendant.
Yeah, but we can't prove anybody's a real descendant. How are you going to prove that? So,
well, let's say you could trace it.
Yeah, but I'm saying I know that that's what he says, but I'm saying I believe it means a spiritual descendant. So, okay.
Or maybe genetic testing, like DNA testing.
I don't think Rambam knew about genetic testing.
I don't even think the genetic testing would only tell you if they share an ancestor, maybe through the mother. It wouldn't necessarily mean through the father.
Or maybe it'll get better by the time Mashiach comes.
Yeah, that's not my goal anyway. I believe it has to be a spiritual descendant. Okay, so for a Kohen, you need an actual descendant. For a Kohen, you need to be a male descendant. You have to have the Y chromosome. But if you don't have the Y chromosome, then we're going to look at you suspiciously. But if you have the Y chromosome, it doesn't mean you're a Kohen, because you could have lost the kahuna regardless.
Yeah.
But if anything, if there's any figure in our Bible who shows the weaknesses of genetics, it's David. King David comes from the union of Ruth and Boaz. And the only reason why Boaz was able to marry Ruth is because the other figures didn't want to marry her. Ploni Almoni said, I'm not marrying her because it says in Torah you can't marry a Moabite. So David comes along, so Boaz comes along and says, yeah, that's a Moabite male, but not a Moabite female. Moabites were the enemy. David comes from the enemy. He is coming from one second. David is coming from a Moabite. Who is a Moabite? Who's a Moabite from? Where's Moab from?
Lot.
Moab is the union of Lot and his daughter. Which is the definition of a mamzer. So King David comes from the worst lineage in the world. And the Gemara, we saw this in the Gemara. The Gemara says that when David was being anointed, everybody was saying, was mocking him and saying he's not worthy to be king because of his genetics. So David is the paradigm of the person who has the worst yichus, so to speak. And that's the irony of it all. And on the other side, Judah comes from the union of Judah and Tamar, which is also a forbidden union. Judah and Tamar is a forbidden union. It's the father-in-law and his daughter-in-law. Not allowed. Also a kares, a death penalty union. So from these two unions comes our Mashiach. So yes, I know I'm familiar with the Rambam who says that everybody has to be a genetic descendant of David, but I don't believe that we have to take that literally. I think we have to we learn from the David story that it's not about your past as much as it is about your present actions and about your future. Do you have a follow-up question, Akiva?
Well, just one thing, was it 2 unions or 3 unions? Cause there's the Lot one and the Boaz.
There's no, so I'm saying it's filled with problematic unions.
It's 3 problematic.
And more than 3, actually, if we go into it. But yes, John.
I was just thinking about this, right, like you're saying, it's very clear the unions are extremely problematic on many different levels. And that's possibly the point, because even out of these very challenging, very difficult situations, right? What can come from that is a huge potential, right? David is our Melech, he's our potential, like look at what he's able to do. So should we be focused on that or the potential?
Well, that's what I was saying, that the point of the David story is not about where he came from, but about who he was and the potential. That to me is the point, that the ancestry, well, it's important to demonstrate that we have this connection with the past, which is who we are who we come from, but at the same time, it's not important in the sense that it doesn't define us. The pedigree of our parents, of our grandparents, does not define our potential. Yes, you agree. You were trying to say, yeah, Akiva, you're trying to follow up.
I don't know, but did you hear that Ashkenazi Jews, because of I'm not sure exactly why, but like our IQs are like the highest in the world out of any ethnic group?
You know what? I know plenty of dumb Jews. I know plenty of smart Jews. I know plenty of dumb people.
Documented research.
Yeah, I whatever. It doesn't interest me.
Do you think it has to do with Gemara?
No, I don't think it doesn't interest me. You know, it doesn't interest me. It doesn't interest me. You know, so many, I don't even want to entertain that. I don't think Jews are, I made so many Jews who are dumb and idiots.
That's not how that.
And I'm just saying, I'm not interested.
Smart Jews, right?
I met a lot of smart people from every background, from all the different backgrounds, and I don't. First of all, it doesn't impress me, even if it would be true. It's just one way of looking at evidence, but it's not. It's not what Hey, what's up? How you doing? It's just not. It's not. First of all, it's not something I buy into. It's also not interesting to me, and I don't take any pride in that. You know, were we so smart as a people on October 7th? We weren't so smart that day. Were we so smart in predicting the rise of Hitler? We weren't so smart then. So this to me is just, you know, it leads to that type of thinking. I'm not saying it's you, God forbid. That type of thinking leads to arrogance, leads to mistakes, is not, I think, a healthy approach. Each nation in the world has unique qualities that God created that nation with, and has certain capabilities and certain technologies and certain strengths. And each of us as individuals has to figure out in life what are our greatest strengths so that we can work on them and have a big impact on the world and serve Hashem in that way. And, you know, like this triumphalist thinking, oh, well, because let's say Mark Zuckerberg made Facebook, so therefore Jews are better. I just think it's not. I think it's nonsense. Albert Einstein was good, but there were so many other physicists, and you know, also Albert Einstein is just a perfect example of, to me, if you read, we're going on a little bit of a tangent here, but I think I just want to say about Einstein, the world would never have known about Einstein were not for the fact that he was rejected from every single thing he tried in his life until he's sitting there and he wrote 3 papers, which were great. And he wrote them while he was a clerk in a patent office. And he got lucky that somebody actually read his paper, because today, I don't think anybody would read it. So this is an example of the greatness that exists all around us that we just don't even notice. And Ruth is an example of this thinking, this thinking of arrogance. Who is Ruth? Ruth is the mother of the Mashiach. she came in penniless. Everybody was mocking her when she came in. And genetically, she was from the enemy, the Moabites. And yet she becomes the mother of the Mashiach. So to me, the point of this story is stop looking at the pedigree and look at the potential of each person in front of us. That was what Ruth, she came in, and with her kindness, she transformed the Jewish people. Okay, I feel like I cut somebody off, but yeah.
It's also, it's not just genetic, right? There's how you were raised and it's your experience. So it's nature and nurture both. And Ruth came into contact with Naomi and she learned about, how to live as a Jew. And it influenced her and it brought out good qualities in her that were already there, but it amplified her good qualities.
You're exactly right. Exactly. Okay, so let us go on. We're in chapter 1, verse 6. So what have we done so far in the book? That it was the days of Judges, and Elimelech abandoned the people. He went to Moab and he died and his 2 sons died. And Naomi is left with her 2 daughters-in-law. And now she's a stranger with nobody to protect her in a foreign land. And you get the impression that she didn't have a future there in Moab. She wasn't a landowner. She had no husband. She had no sons. She had no future. So she says, let's go back. Let's go back to my homeland, with tremendous humility, because she left there with arrogance and she abandoned them. It would have been like somebody on October 7th deciding to cast their fate with Hamas and move to Gaza. Seriously, she went to the enemy of the Jewish people, the Moabites, because things were rough in Israel. And she got up with her daughters-in-law. Who's her daughters-in-law? Ruth and Orpah. And she returned from the fields of Moab. Kishama b'stei Moab. She heard in the fields of Moab, that God had remembered his people, to give them food. Now, isn't this just this verse is to me such a emotional verse, because sometimes the only time we realize about God is when we leave our community and we look at it from a balcony, so to speak. She had thought that Hashem was not with her people. She had abandoned her people. She left them. She thought God was not there. But now she's in the fields of Moab. And when she's there, all she hears about is how God remembered his people and gave them bread. So it took her to go to another place. You see this all the time. Sometimes Jews only realize their identity when they move away from the Jewish community and they're in a far-flung place. Then all of a sudden they realize how special it is to be Jewish. You can be in a Jewish community, not realize it, but then you step out, go to a place where there are far less Jews, and you realize, wow, such an important thing. So now she's in Moab, and she gets up. She goes out from the place that was there. She has her 2 daughters-in-law with her. Yehuda. And she goes out on the journey to go to the land of Judah. By the way, the word here is lashuv. She's repenting. She realized she sinned before. Why did she sin in leaving the land? It wasn't just that she left the land, but why she left the land. The Talmud says that she and her husband had money, and the other people didn't have money, and they were knocking on her door, and she didn't want to share it. So she got out of there. That's what the Talmud says. She didn't want to share her wealth.
Her or her husband?
They were a unit. They didn't want to share their wealth. They said, let's go there. The schnorrers can't find us. That's what they were saying. We'll be safe in Moab. Nobody's going to knock on our doors there. That's what her thinking was.
Did they convert before they married sons or after? Or
So there was no formal conversion back then that we know of, but the implication is that that they didn't accept the gods of the Jewish people, that Ruth and Orpah did not accept the God of the Jewish people, because it was when they first got married to Ruth's children. It was only when she was returning that they committed to being part of the Jewish people. So the verse says, Rashi says, "Vatetzim min hamakom." So Rashi points out, why does it have to say she left the place? It already says that she got up to leave. It already says, Vatashav mistei Moav. It already says that. So it's to tell us, Rashi says, this is also, we're studying in memory of Tom. So listen to this phrase from Rashi, which will just pierce our hearts. Rashi says, it's to tell us, Sheyitziat tzadik min hamakom nikeret va'user roshet. Pana ziva, pana adara, pana shifcha shel ir vayatza. I'll translate it. It's to tell us that when a tzaddik, when a righteous man leaves a place, it's recognizable and it makes a mark. That's why. Why does it say she left the place? She didn't. It's not just she left. Her departure made a mark on the place where, when the tzaddik is there in the town, it's people are aware of the presence. When the tzaddik leaves, makes a mark. People are aware. As it says, the glory has departed, the splendor has departed, the praise of the city has departed. And Rashi cites the parallel wording, Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva, that Jacob departed from Beersheva, and then he went to Haran. It wasn't just that Jacob went to Haran, his departure was noticeable. There was a void in the world. That it's not easy to fill that space. Everybody in this world is replaceable. The world is filled with irreplaceable people. That doesn't mean that there isn't just tremendous chasm in the world, tremendous void. And I was thinking about Tom also when I was reading this now, because his place was so big, and there's such a chasm that was left. So that's what it says. She left. She departed from the place. Tomer Naomi, verse 8. And Naomi said, Naomi says to her two daughters-in-law, Lechna Shovna, go back, return, Isha Avetima, go back to your mother's home. Yas Hashem imachem chesed, kasher asitem imam meitim ve'imadi. And Hashem should do kindness with you, just like he did with the dead and with me. So Hashem should do kindness with you, just like he did with the dead and with me. So who was the dead that Hashem did? Just as you have done kindness to your husbands during their lifetimes, and to me. So Hashem should do kindness to you. So that's the Ruth is begging them to go back. And one more verse. This is, by the way, the source of the idea. Those who deal with the dead, it's called Chesed Shel Emet, true kindness. Why? Because every other mitzvah you do, you expect to be paid back for. But when you do a kindness to the dead, you don't get paid back. I just want to close, but I want to say,